In the age of swipe-right romance and digital connections, millions of people meet their partners online every single day. Most of these encounters lead to coffee dates, awkward small talk, or maybe even love stories. But what happens when a simple dating app conversation turns into a nightmare that destroys multiple lives in a matter of seconds? On June 21st, 2022, in Gulfport, Mississippi, a young man from California traveled across the country to meet someone he had connected with through a dating website. What he discovered that night would trigger a violent reaction so shocking, so instantaneous, that it would leave one person dead and another fighting for their life. 22-year-old Makhari Seven Gasaway had made the journey from Los Angeles to Mississippi with expectations of romance. The conversations had been promising, the connection felt real, and the decision to meet in person seemed natural. But as midnight approached on that fateful Tuesday night, what should have been a hopeful encounter would transform into one of the most senseless hate crimes the Gulf Coast had ever witnessed. The apartment complex on 39th Avenue seemed ordinary enough, just another place where people lived their daily lives, unaware that within hours, their quiet neighborhood would become the center of a murder investigation that would shock the entire community. Stay with me because this story will challenge everything you think you know about online safety, and more importantly, it will expose the deadly consequences of hatred and intolerance in our modern world. This isn't just another true crime story. It's a wake-up call about the dangers that vulnerable communities face every single day, and the split-second decisions that can destroy lives forever. What you're about to hear will make you question how well you really know the people you meet online. It will make you think twice about the assumptions we make about others, and the violence that can erupt when those assumptions are shattered by reality. The clock struck midnight in Gulfport, Mississippi, and 27-year-old Brushawn Shawmay McClam was about to open her door to a stranger who would end her life within minutes. Her sister, 21-year-old Kenesha McClain, was also in the apartment, completely unaware that they were both about to become victims of a crime so brutal and senseless that it would leave investigators struggling to understand the sheer hatred behind it. In less than 60 seconds, gunshots would ring out in that quiet apartment complex, forever changing the lives of everyone involved. Two families would be destroyed, and a community would be left searching for answers to an unthinkable act of violence. Brushawn Shawmay McClam was 27 years old when her life was violently cut short that night in Gulfport. Like many young people her age, she was navigating the complexities of modern life, searching for connection, love, and acceptance in a world that often felt hostile to people like her. Brushawn was a transgender woman, and this simple fact about her identity would ultimately cost her everything. Living as a transgender person in the Deep South comes with unique challenges that most people never have to consider. Every day brought decisions about safety, about disclosure, about when and how to reveal the most personal aspects of her identity. Brushawn had dreams and aspirations just like anyone else, but she also carried the heavy burden of knowing that her very existence made some people uncomfortable, and tragically, some people violent. 21-year-old Kenesha McClain wasn't just Brushawn's sister. She was her closest confidant, her support system, and one of the few people who truly understood the daily struggles that came with being transgender in America. The bond between these siblings was unbreakable, forged through shared experiences and mutual protection in a world that didn't always welcome them with open arms. Kenesha had watched her sister navigate the challenges of transitioning, the discrimination, the fear, and the constant vigilance required just to live authentically. She had been there through the difficult moments when Brushawn questioned whether it was worth the risk to be true to herself. On that terrible night in June, Kenesha was simply spending time with her beloved sister, never knowing that their evening together would end in tragedy and trauma that would haunt her forever. For transgender individuals, especially transgender women of color, the statistics are terrifying. They face disproportionately high rates of violence, discrimination, and murder compared to the general population. Every year, dozens of transgender people are killed simply for being who they are, and many more attacks go unreported or unrecognized by authorities. The transgender experience involves constant risk assessment, deciding which bathrooms are safe to use, which neighborhoods to avoid, which jobs to apply for, and crucially, when and how to disclose their identity to potential romantic partners. This last decision is perhaps the most dangerous of all. Studies show that transgender women face extreme violence when their identity is discovered by men who feel deceived or threatened by the revelation. It's a deadly catch-22. Disclose too early and risk rejection or violence. Wait too long and risk an even more violent reaction. Dating while transgender requires a level of courage that most people cannot comprehend. Every swipe, every message, every first meeting carries the potential for rejection, humiliation, or worse. Transgender women must constantly weigh their desire for love and companionship against their need for safety and survival. Many transgender individuals turn to online dating platforms because they offer a perceived sense of control, the ability to share their story on their own terms, to connect with people who might be more understanding, and to build relationships before meeting face to face. But even these digital spaces can become dangerous when the wrong person discovers information they weren't prepared to accept. Brush On, like countless others in her community, was simply trying to find someone who would love and accept her for who she truly was. She had no way of knowing that her search for connection would lead to her death. In the weeks leading up to that fatal night in June, Makhari Seven Gassaway and Brush On Charmaine McClam had been building what seemed like a genuine connection through a dating website. 22-year-old Gassaway, living in Los Angeles, California, had somehow crossed paths with 27-year-old Brush On in the digital realm where geography becomes irrelevant and hearts can connect across thousands of miles. Their conversations likely started innocently enough, shared interests, flirtatious messages, and the gradual building of trust that happens when two people believe they've found something special. For Brush On, this connection represented hope. For Gassaway, it would become the catalyst for a decision that would destroy multiple lives and land him behind bars for decades. The dating website became their bridge between two different worlds, his life in California and hers in Mississippi. Messages turned into longer conversations, and longer conversations built a foundation for what both believed could be something meaningful. Gassaway was apparently invested enough in this connection to make plans for a cross-country trip, suggesting that their digital relationship had progressed to a serious level.
California man has been sentenced for a deadly Gulfport shooting following a guilty plea. 22-year-old Makhari Gassaway was sentenced to 50 years in prison for shooting and killing Brush On Charmaine McClam. The investigation began in June 2022 when Gulfport police responded to a shooting at an apartment complex on 39th Avenue. The victim's sister was also injured in the shooting. Gassaway was also charged with tampering with evidence after admitting to deleting messages between him and the victim.
But here's where the story takes a darker turn. During their online exchanges, crucial information about Brush On's identity may not have been fully disclosed or understood. Whether this was intentional on her part, or whether Gassaway simply made assumptions based on photos and conversations, remains unclear. What we do know is that this gap in communication would prove to be absolutely fatal when reality finally met expectation. Looking back at this tragic case, there were warning signs that might have predicted the violence to come, though they may not have been obvious at the time. The fact that Gassaway was willing to travel across the entire country to meet someone he had only known online suggests an intensity that could be romantic or obsessive. His later actions would prove it was the latter. Another red flag was the apparent lack of video calls or more detailed conversations about identity and expectations before the meeting. In healthy online relationships, people typically progress through multiple stages of communication before meeting in person. The rush to meet face-to-face, combined with what appears to be incomplete disclosure about important personal details, created a perfect storm for disaster. Have you ever met someone online? What precautions did you take? Did you meet in a public place first, tell friends where you were going, or have video calls before meeting face-to-face? These questions aren't just casual curiosity. They could literally save your life. The choices we make when transitioning from digital connections to real-world meetings can mean the difference between finding love and finding danger. Most dating safety experts recommend meeting in crowded, public locations for first encounters. They suggest telling trusted friends about your plans, sharing location data, and having an exit strategy. Unfortunately, Brushon and Gasaway's first meeting would take place in the privacy of her apartment, a decision that would eliminate any chance of outside intervention when things went horribly wrong. The arrangement to meet at Brushon's apartment on 39th Avenue in Gulfport was made with what both parties likely believed were good intentions. For Brushon, inviting someone into her personal space represented trust and intimacy. For Gasaway, accepting this invitation meant he was serious about taking their relationship to the next level. The meeting was scheduled for around midnight on June 21, 2022, a time when the world would be quiet and they could have privacy to get to know each other without distractions. Neither of them could have predicted that within minutes of Gasaway's arrival, gunshots would ring out in that apartment complex, forever changing the trajectory of multiple families and leaving a community in shock over the senseless violence that was about to unfold. As the clock approached midnight on June 21, 2022, the apartment complex on 39th Avenue in Gulfport was settling into the quiet rhythm of a typical Tuesday night. Most residents were asleep, unaware that their peaceful neighborhood was about to become the scene of a hate crime that would shock the entire Gulf Coast community. Brushon Charmaine McClam was likely feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she prepared to meet Macari 7 Gasaway in person for the first time. After weeks of online conversations, this moment represented the possibility of real connection and perhaps even love. Her sister Kenesha McClain was also in the apartment, probably offering moral support or simply spending time together as siblings often do. When Gasaway arrived at the apartment complex, he was carrying more than just hopes for romance. He was armed with a firearm that he would use within minutes of his arrival. The weapon's presence suggests that either he came prepared for violence, or he habitually carried it for protection. Either way, its availability would prove catastrophic for everyone involved in the events that were about to unfold. The exact details of what happened in those first few minutes after Gasaway entered the apartment may never be fully known, but the outcome was devastating beyond comprehension. At some point during their initial interaction, Gasaway discovered that Brushon was transgender, information that apparently had not been clearly communicated during their online relationship. Instead of simply walking away, having a conversation, or processing this information like a rational human being, Gasaway's reaction was immediate and violent. In his later confession to police, he would admit that he shot McClam specifically because he found out that McClam was a male. This statement reveals the depth of his transphobia and his complete inability to see Brushon as the woman she truly was. The discovery that triggered such rage lasted only seconds, but those seconds contained enough hatred to destroy multiple lives forever. What should have been a moment of awkward conversation or disappointed departure became instead a moment of pure, deadly violence. Gasaway's reaction was so extreme, so disproportionate to the situation, that it defies rational explanation and speaks to a level of intolerance that most people cannot comprehend. The gunshots that rang out in that apartment shattered the midnight silence and changed everything in an instant. Brushon Charmaine McClam, who had simply been trying to find love and acceptance, was struck by 2 bullets and died immediately. Her life, her dreams, her hopes for the future, all extinguished in seconds by a man who couldn't accept her for who she was. But Gasaway's violence didn't stop with Brushon. Her sister Kenesha McClain, who had done nothing except be in the wrong place at the wrong time, was also shot 3 times. Unlike her sister, Kenesha survived the attack, but she would carry both physical and emotional scars for the rest of her life. The trauma of watching her beloved sister murdered in front of her, combined with her own near-death experience, created wounds that no amount of time could fully heal. The apartment that had been filled with hope and anticipation just moments before was now a crime scene soaked in blood and tragedy. 2 young women had been shot, one fatally, by a man whose hatred was so intense that he couldn't control his violent impulses. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, as Kenesha McClain lay wounded and fighting for her life next to her sister's lifeless body, Gasaway made a series of calculated decisions that revealed the premeditated nature of his actions. Rather than calling for help, showing remorse, or attempting to save the life of the woman he had just wounded, he focused entirely on his own escape and covering his tracks. Gasaway quickly gathered his belongings and fled the apartment complex on a bicycle, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable horror. His choice of transportation, a bicycle rather than a car, suggests he had planned his escape route carefully, knowing that a bike would be quieter and less traceable than a motor vehicle. This wasn't a crime of passion followed by panic. This was a methodical exit strategy executed by someone who understood he had just committed murder. As he pedaled through the dark streets of Gulfport, Gasaway was already working to destroy evidence of his connection to Brushon. He would later admit to police that he deleted all messages between them, attempting to erase any digital trail that could link him to the victim. The call came into Gulfport Police Dispatch in the early morning hours of June 21, 2022. Shots fired at an apartment complex on 39th Avenue. When officers arrived at the scene, they were confronted with a horrific sight that would haunt them for years to come. Brushon Charmaine McClam lay dead from 2 gunshot wounds, while her sister Kenesha McClain was clinging to life despite suffering 3 gunshot wounds. The crime scene told a story of sudden, brutal violence, but it also held the keys to solving the case. Blood evidence, bullet trajectories, and the positioning of the victims all provided crucial information about what had happened in those final moments. However, the most important witness was Kenesha herself, who despite her severe injuries, was able to provide police with their first description of the shooter, an unknown black male wearing dark clothes who had entered their apartment around midnight. What happened next would showcase the power of modern investigative techniques and the dedication of law enforcement officers who refused to let this hate crime go unsolved. Gulfport detectives immediately began the painstaking process of gathering surveillance footage from every possible source in the area, knowing that in today's world, cameras are everywhere and someone, somewhere, had captured the killer's movements. The investigation team collected video surveillance from more than 20 locations throughout Gulfport, gas stations, convenience stores, traffic cameras, apartment complexes, and businesses that might have recorded even a glimpse of the suspect's escape route. This wasn't just a matter of checking 1 or 2 cameras. It required coordinating with dozens of property owners, reviewing hundreds of hours of footage, and carefully analyzing every frame for potential evidence. The sheer scope of the surveillance review demonstrates how seriously law enforcement took this case and their commitment to finding justice for Brushon and her family. The breakthrough came when detectives began connecting the dots between multiple surveillance cameras, creating a digital trail that followed the suspect's movements through the streets of Gulfport. Frame by frame, camera by camera, they tracked a figure on a bicycle moving away from the crime scene in the hours after the shooting. This wasn't easy work. It required matching timestamps, identifying the same person across different camera angles and lighting conditions, and following a route that zigzagged through residential neighborhoods and commercial areas. The bicycle trail led investigators on a path through the city, each camera providing another piece of the puzzle that would eventually lead them to their suspect. The trail ended at another apartment complex, where the final surveillance camera showed the bicyclist arriving and disappearing from view. This location would prove to be the key to solving the entire case, as detectives now had a specific area to focus their investigation and search for physical evidence. At the apartment complex where the bicycle trail ended, investigators made their first major discovery: the bicycle itself, abandoned and waiting to tell its story. This wasn't just any bicycle. It was the vehicle that had carried a murderer away from his crime, and it potentially held DNA evidence, fingerprints, or other forensic clues that could identify the killer. The discovery of the bicycle gave detectives probable cause to obtain a search warrant for the nearby apartment where they believed the suspect might be staying. Armed with legal authority to search the premises, investigators prepared to gather what they hoped would be the evidence needed to solve this brutal hate crime. The search warrant process moved quickly, as prosecutors and judges recognized the urgency of the situation. With a dangerous killer potentially still in the area, and with solid evidence pointing to a specific location, law enforcement had everything they needed to take the next crucial step in their investigation. When detectives executed the search warrant at the apartment, they struck investigative gold. Inside, they discovered a treasure trove of evidence that would tie Macari 7 Gasaway directly to the murder of Brushon McClam. The apartment contained his identification documents, confirming his identity and his connection to the location where the bicycle trail had ended. Even more damning was the discovery of the firearm used in the shooting, the weapon that had ended Brushon's life and nearly killed her sister. The gun's presence in the apartment provided the physical link between Gasaway and the crime that prosecutors would need to secure a conviction. Investigators also found the dark clothes that matched Kenesha McClain's description of what the shooter had been wearing during the attack. These garments likely contained gunshot residue, blood evidence, or other forensic material that would further strengthen the case against Gasaway and prove his presence at the crime scene. With overwhelming physical evidence linking him to the crime, Makari 7 Gasaway was arrested and brought in for questioning by Gulfport detectives. The 22-year-old from Los Angeles now faced the reality of what he had done. 2 people shot, 1 dead, and a mountain of evidence pointing directly at him as the perpetrator. During the interrogation, Gasaway was confronted with the facts that investigators had methodically gathered: the surveillance footage showing his bicycle route, the physical evidence found in his apartment, and the testimony of the surviving victim. Faced with this overwhelming case against him, Gasaway made a decision that would seal his fate and expose the true nature of his crime. Rather than maintaining his innocence or refusing to cooperate, Gasaway began to admit his involvement in the shooting, starting with his ownership of the murder weapon. When detectives questioned Gasaway about the firearm found in his apartment, he made his first crucial admission. Yes, the gun was his. This confession immediately established his connection to the murder weapon and eliminated any possibility that he could claim the firearm belonged to someone else or had been planted as evidence. But Gasaway's admissions didn't stop there. He also confirmed that he had gone to the apartment on 39th Avenue to meet Brushon McClam, whom he had connected with through a dating website. This statement corroborated the digital trail that investigators had been building and confirmed that the meeting between victim and perpetrator had been prearranged. These initial confessions were just the beginning. What Gasaway would reveal next would expose the hate-filled motivation behind his violent actions and demonstrate the depth of his transphobia and intolerance. The most damning confession came when Gasaway admitted to detectives exactly why he had pulled the trigger. In his own words, he told investigators that he shot McClam when he found out that McClam was a male. This statement revealed the true nature of the crime: not a robbery gone wrong, not a dispute over money or drugs, but pure hatred based on transgender identity. This confession exposed Gasaway's complete inability to see Brushon as the woman she was. His use of male pronouns and his characterization of her identity as deception rather than authenticity demonstrated the transphobic mindset that had driven him to violence. The statement also revealed that his reaction to learning about Brushon's transgender status was immediate and deadly, with no consideration for her humanity or right to exist. This wasn't just murder. It was a hate crime motivated by bigotry and intolerance. Gasaway's confession also revealed his attempts to cover up the crime and destroy evidence of his connection to Brushon. According to Assistant District Attorney Chris Daniel, Gasaway admitted to deleting all messages between himself and McClam after the murder. This deliberate destruction of digital evidence showed that his actions after the shooting were calculated and intentional, not the panicked reactions of someone overwhelmed by what they had done. The deletion of their conversations eliminated potential evidence about the nature of their relationship, what had been discussed before their meeting, and whether Brushon's transgender identity had been disclosed during their online interactions. By destroying these messages, Gasaway was attempting to control the narrative and hide crucial details about the events leading up to the murder. This cover-up behavior demonstrated consciousness of guilt and premeditation in his efforts to avoid prosecution. Faced with overwhelming evidence and his own confessions, Gasaway ultimately decided to accept responsibility for his actions through the legal system. On Friday, October 11, 2024, he appeared before the court and entered guilty pleas to multiple charges stemming from that deadly night in June 2022. Gasaway pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder for the death of Brushon Charmaine McClam, 1 count of aggravated assault for the shooting of Kenesha McClain, and 1 count of tampering with evidence for his attempts to destroy digital communications and cover up his crimes. These guilty pleas meant that Gasaway accepted legal responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that he had committed these crimes. The plea agreement would spare the McClam family the trauma of a lengthy trial, while ensuring that justice would be served for this senseless hate crime. During the sentencing hearing, Judge Lisa Dotson delivered words that cut straight to the heart of this senseless tragedy. Looking directly at Gasaway, she asked a question that everyone was thinking. Why didn't you just walk out? I can't fathom why you would react so viscerally as to shoot somebody. No one did anything to you. The family will suffer forever, and you will have this long sentence. Her words captured the bewilderment that most rational people feel when confronted with such extreme hatred and violence over something as simple as someone's identity. Judge Dotson sentenced Gasaway to a combined sentence of 50 years, with 20 years suspended and 30 years to serve in prison, followed by 5 years of reporting post-release supervision. This means that Gasaway will spend the next 3 decades behind bars, missing out on his entire adult life because he chose violence over understanding. The sentence reflects the severity of his crimes and sends a clear message that hate-motivated violence will not be tolerated in our justice system. District Attorney W. Crosby Parker emphasized the devastating impact of this crime, stating, "This senseless and tragic crime caused a huge loss for the family and friends of Brushawn McClam. This is an important day for the family as they seek justice for the loss of a beloved son and sibling. The McClam family will never recover from losing Brushawn, and Kenesha will carry both physical and emotional scars for the rest of her life. No sentence can bring Brushawn back or erase the trauma that her family has endured. The tragedy of Brushawn's murder offers crucial lessons about online dating safety that could save lives. First, always meet new people in public places during your first several encounters. Never invite someone you've never met to your home or go to theirs. Second, tell trusted friends about your plans, share your location, and establish check-in times so someone knows where you are and when to expect contact from you. Third, trust your instincts about people's reactions and behavior during conversations. If someone seems overly intense, asks inappropriate questions, or makes you uncomfortable in any way, end the interaction immediately. Fourth, consider video calls before meeting in person to get a better sense of who you're talking to and to gauge their reactions to important information about yourself. For transgender individuals specifically, the decision of when and how to disclose identity is deeply personal and potentially dangerous. While no one should have to hide who they are, safety must always be the top priority. Consider disclosing your transgender status early in online conversations to avoid dangerous situations like the one that cost Brushawn her life. Connect with local LGBTQ+ organizations that can provide resources and support for safe dating practices. Everyone can play a role in preventing these tragedies by supporting transgender individuals in our communities, challenging transphobic attitudes when we encounter them, and creating environments where people can live authentically without fear of violence. Education and acceptance are the antidotes to the hatred that killed Brushawn McClam. Like this video if it opened your eyes to the dangers that transgender people face every day. Share it to spread awareness about online dating safety. And subscribe for more stories that matter and could save lives. What are your thoughts on online dating safety? Have you ever found yourself in a situation that made you uncomfortable? And how did you handle it? Your experiences in the comments could help someone else stay safe.